history of human thought, Christianity invented the devil, and then the devil invented Satanism. It's rather like creating your own enemy and then being surprised when someone decides to join his side. The whole affair has the quality of a cosmic practical joke, and if you can't see the humour in it, you've rather missed the point of both traditions. What I propose to do here is something that will likely irritate believers on both sides, which is usually a good sign that we're getting somewhere interesting. I want to look at Christianity and Satanism not as warring armies of absolute good and evil, but as two complementary responses to the same fundamental questions about human existence. They are, if you will, the yin and yang of Western religious consciousness, each defining itself by what it opposes, each secretly dependent on the other for its very meaning. Now, before the pitchforks and crucifixes come out, let me be clear, I'm not here to convert anyone to anything. As I've always maintained, irrevocable commitment to any religion is intellectual suicide. What I'm after is understanding that rarest of human achievements, and understanding, unlike belief, requires that we suspend our certainties long enough to actually see what's in front of us. The historical dance and how Christianity taught the devil to tango, the scholarly consensus, and this is quite fascinating, is that modern Satanism couldn't exist without Christianity. It's what the academics call an invention of Christianity. Relying on a character deriving from Christian mythology, this is the first great irony we must appreciate, as Satan is Christianity's shadow, and like all shadows, he only appears when there's something to block the light. In the Hebrew Bible, Satan simply meant adversary or opponent, a role, not a proper name. He was the divine prosecutor in Yahweh's heavenly court, a member in good standing of the celestial bureaucracy. Picture him as something like the Attorney General in God's administration, charged with testing human loyalty. Not evil, mind you, just doing his job. But then something remarkable happened during the Second Temple period, when the Jews encountered Persian Zoroastrianism during the Babylonian exile. Here was a religion with genuine dualism, Ahura Mazda versus Angra Mainyu, light battling darkness, good-locked-in cosmic struggle with evil, and this idea took root. By the time we get to the New Testament, Satan has been promoted from bureaucrat to ruler of this world, from prosecuting attorney to cosmic rebel, from tester to tempter. This development tells us something profound about the Christian psyche. It needed an explanation for evil that wouldn't implicate God directly. The theodicy problem, how to reconcile an omnipotent, loving God with a world full of suffering, required a villain. Enter stage left to the devil, now fully evolved into the personification of everything God is not. Now here's where it gets really interesting. For most of Christian history, Satan wasn't particularly important theologically. In the medieval period, he was often comic relief in mystery plays, a figure to be mocked rather than feared. But during the early modern period, particularly with the witch trials of 1450-1750, Satan suddenly became terrifyingly real again. Some 40,000 to 60,000 people, mostly women, were executed for allegedly consorting with him. The scholarly consensus today is that there was no organized satanic witch cult. It was a collective delusion, a moral panic, a projection of cultural anxieties onto convenient scapegoats. But then, in 1667, something transformative occurred. John Milton published Paradise Lost. Milton's Satan was no comic devil or mere theological abstraction. He was eloquent, dignified, tragic, a rebel who declared, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven." Milton, as William Blake later observed, was of the devil's party without knowing it. The Romantic poets ran with this. To Blake, Byron, Shelley, and their cohort, Satan became a symbol of rebellion against tyranny, of intellectual freedom against dogmatic authority, of the individual against the collective. Pierre Joseph Proudhon could write, "Come, Satan, come, thou who has been calumniated by priests and kings." Mikhail Bakunin declared Satan the eternal rebel, the first freethinker and emancipator of worlds. This literary transformation from medieval buffoon to romantic hero made modern religious Satanism possible. When Anton LaVey founded the Church of Satan on Walpurgisnacht 1966, he was drawing on 3 centuries of increasingly sympathetic portrayals of the devil. But here's the profound irony: LaVey's Satan wasn't even real. The Church of Satan is fundamentally atheistic. Satan is explicitly a symbol, not a deity. So we have this marvelous situation where Christianity created Satan to explain evil. Literature romanticized Satan as a symbol of freedom, and then Satanism adopted the symbol while denying the ontology. It's like Christianity threw a boomerang and it came back labeled metaphor. LaVey and Satanism are in Ranit Black Key. Let's be precise about what Anton LaVey actually created, because it's quite different from what most Christians imagine when they hear Satanism. LaVey himself was refreshingly honest about his sources. My religion is just Ayn Rand's philosophy, with ceremony and ritual added. If you've read Rand's Atlas Shrugged or heard her extol the virtue of selfishness, you know exactly what LaVey was up to. The 9 satanic statements at open the Satanic Bible read like a systematic inversion of Christianity. Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence, vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams, undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit, kindness to those who deserve it instead of love wasted on ingrates, vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. Man is just another animal, the most vicious animal of all the so-called sins, as they lead to gratification. Now, from a Christian perspective, this looks like pure evil, but from a Zen perspective, and this is where it gets interesting, it looks like a particular response to a particular kind of phoniness. LaVey was reacting against what he saw as Christian hypocrisy, people mouthing pious platitudes about loving their enemies while secretly resenting them, preaching self-sacrifice while pursuing self-interest by stealth, condemning the body while obsessing over sex. LaVey said, why not be honest? We're animals. We have desires. We want pleasure, power, sex, success. Christianity teaches you to feel guilty about these natural impulses and then offers salvation from the guilt it created. It's a protection racket. Why not just stop feeling guilty? In Taoist terms, LaVey was advocating for wu-wei action in accordance with one's nature. Except LaVey identified human nature entirely with what the Taoists would call yang aggression, assertion, competition, dominance. He missed the complementary in entirely. His philosophy is unbalanced. All thrust and no yield, all action and no receptivity. This becomes clear in his ethics. LaVey replaced the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, with what he called lex talionis, the law of retaliation. Do unto others as they do unto you. It's the ancient principle of an eye for an eye, which, as Gandhi observed, makes the whole world blind. But here's what's psychologically interesting. LaVey's rituals aren't supernatural, they're explicitly psychodrama. Greater magic, as he called it, a change in situations or events in accordance with one's will, which would, using normally accepted methods, be unchangeable. But the mechanism is psychological, not magical. The rituals provide emotional catharsis, help focus intent, allow the suspension of skepticism in what he called an intellectual decompression chamber. This is actually quite sophisticated. LaVey understood something that Christianity often misses. A ritual works not because supernatural forces intervene, but because the ritual itself transforms consciousness. A Zen master would understand this perfectly. The bowing, the incense, the chanting, these don't summon external powers, they reorganize internal reality. Where LaVey went wrong, and this is crucial, is in his embrace of social Darwinism. His contempt for weakness is anti-egalitarianism. He praised the alien elite and scorned the herd. This is precisely what Nietzsche meant by master morality, and it's profoundly at odds with any genuine spiritual wisdom, Eastern or Western. The mystical traditions, whether Christian contemplatives like Meister Eckhart or Zen masters like Dogen, all point toward the dissolution of the ego's boundaries, the recognition of fundamental interconnection. LaVey went exactly the opposite direction. He deified the ego. We Satanists are thus our own gods, proclaims the Church of Satan's official doctrine. The self is the highest authority. I am supreme. But here's the paradox. LaVey never quite grasped the ego you're deifying doesn't actually exist. It's a construct, a useful fiction, a convenient reference point, but not an entity. As I've always maintained, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The self that thinks it's in control is itself a thought. The ego that claims to be God is claiming divine status for a mirage. The satanic temple when the devil becomes a democrat. Now, if LaVeyan Satanism is Ayn Rand with rituals, the satanic temple is something quite different and, to my mind, considerably more interesting. Founded in 2013 by Lucian Greaves and Malcolm Jarry, TSD has grown from 10,000 members in 2019 to over 700,000 in 2024, making it, by their claim, the largest satanic organization in history. The 7 tenets of TSD read almost like Enlightenment philosophy, with a satanic label. 1. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy. 2. The struggle for justice should prevail over laws and institutions. 3. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. 4. The freedoms of others should be respected. 5. Beliefs should conform to best scientific understanding. 6. People are fallible. If one makes a mistake, rectify it. 7. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always A Christian reading these might think, well, these aren't so terrible, which is precisely the point. TSD has taken Satan as a symbol of rebellion against arbitrary authority, while jettisoning the social Darwinism, elitism, and cruelty of LaVeyan Satanism. They've kept their adversarial stance while embracing compassion. It's quite a trick. Their strategy is what scholars call poison pill activism. When Christians demand religious monuments on government property, TSD demands their Baphomet statue. When schools allow Christian clubs, TSD creates after-school Satan clubs. When abortion restrictions claim religious justification, TSD declares abortion a religious ritual protected under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The genius of this approach is that it forces a choice of either genuine religious pluralism, where Satanists get equal treatment with Christians, or genuine secularism, where no religious expression is privileged in public spaces. Either all religions or no religions, but not Christianity only. Now, most Christians find this infuriating, which is understandable, but let's look at it from another angle. What TSD is doing is holding up a mirror. They are saying, if you want your 10 commandments in the courthouse, you must accept our Baphomet too. If that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps you're not really advocating for religious freedom, you're advocating for Christian privilege. This is actually a very Zen approach. The Zen master, when confronted with conceptual rigidity, often responds with something outrageous to shatter the student's fixed view. What is Buddha? Asks the student. 3 pounds of flax, replies the master, or the dry chitstick. The point isn't the content of the answer, but the shattering of conceptual imprisonment. TSD's tactics serve a similar function. They're not really trying to promote Satanism. Most members are atheists using Satan symbolically. They're trying to shatter Christian assumptions about religious privilege in America, and it's working legally, culturally, and rhetorically. The theological differences between TSD and LaVeyan Satanism are worth noting. TSD explicitly rejects social Darwinism, embraces egalitarianism, emphasizes compassion and justice, and engages in charitable works. LaVey would have scorned all of this as weakness. TSD's first tenet literally begins with compassion, the very quality Buddhism identifies as central to enlightenment. What we have here is an evolution from reactive Satanism, merely inverting Christianity, to rationalist Satanism, LaVey's atheistic self-religion, to what we might call pragmatic Satanism, using the symbol of Satan to advance actually quite reasonable political goals like church-state separation, reproductive rights, and evidence-based policy. It's all very amusing, really. The devil has become a progressive activist. Satan is fighting for compassion, science, and bodily autonomy. If Milton's Satan would reign in hell rather than serve in heaven, TSD's Satan says, actually, I'd rather just have sensible public policy and keep religion out of government. Theistic Satanism are when some people actually mean it. Now, we come to the Minority Report to actual devil worship. Only about 13.6% of surveyed Satanists are genuinely theistic. They believe Satan is a real entity, deserving of veneration. This is quite different from both LaVeyan's symbolism and TSD's political activism. Theistic Satanism is diverse and decentralized, ranging from reverse Christians who accept Christian ontology but side with Satan, to spiritual evolutionists who see Satan as a guide to higher consciousness, to Gnostic syncretics who identify Satan with the liberating serpent in Eden. From a Christian perspective, these folks are genuinely worshipping demons. From a psychological perspective, they're engaging with archetypal forces, what Jung called the shadow, and finding empowerment in embracing what society condemns. From an anthropological perspective, They're creating meaning through the appropriation and inversion of dominant religious symbols. What's interesting is that even among theistic Satanists, most practice alone, some 80% rarely meet, co-religionists. Their religion is fundamentally private, interior, experiential. They're not trying to convert anyone. They're not building megachurches. They're conducting personal rituals in private spaces, seeking their own transformation. This actually resembles certain forms of mystical Christianity more than it resembles institutional Christianity. The mystic, too, seeks direct experience of the divine. The mystic, too, is often suspect to the institutional church. Meister Eckhart was condemned as a heretic. St. John of the Cross was imprisoned by his own order. Why? Because mystical experience transcends institutional control. As I noted in my critiques of Christianity, the Church has therefore always been highly suspicious of mystics because they seem to be insubordinate and to claim equality or, worse, identity with God. The same suspicion applies to any individual claiming direct spiritual authority apart from ecclesiastical mediation. The dangerous groups like the Order of Nine Angles with their neo-Nazi ideology, advocacy of culling, and connections to terrorism represent the extreme pathological edge. They are about as representative of Satanism as the Westboro Baptist Church is of Christianity, which is to say not at all, except as a cautionary tale about what happens when religious rebellion turns towards genuine malevolence. But for most theistic Satanists, the devil functions as a Gnostic revealer, a Promethean light bringer, a symbol of the divine feminine as Pafaxneld documents in his research on satanic feminism, or simply a non-Christian name for the numinous. They're not trying to hurt anyone. They're trying to find meaning in a cosmos that seems indifferent to human concerns. Christianity, the religion that created its opposite. Now let's turn to the other player in this cosmic drama. Christianity presents itself as a religion of love, mercy, grace, and redemption, at its best in figures like Francis of Assisi, in the radical compassion of Jesus's parables, in the contemplative wisdom of the mystics it achieves something genuinely beautiful. The core message is profound. God becomes human in Jesus Christ, suffers and dies, resurrects, and through this cosmic drama redeems humanity from sin and death. Salvation is offered freely through grace. Love God and love your neighbor. The meek shall inherit the earth. Turn the other cheek. Forgive 70 times 7. This is radical stuff. The Roman Empire was built on power, hierarchy, honor, and domination. Christianity said that the last shall be first. God sides with the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized. The kingdom of God is not of this world. Revolutionary teaching. But then, and this is where we must be honest, Christianity became Constantinian in 313 CE. Constantine legalized Christianity. By 380 CE, Theodosius made it the official state religion. The persecuted became the persecutors. The religion that began with love your enemies was soon burning heretics, launching crusades, sanctifying slavery, and blessing warfare. The institution that Jesus might barely recognize developed elaborate hierarchies, accumulated vast wealth, claimed political power, and insisted on intellectual submission to dogma. As I've always maintained, Christianity, as it was practiced, was guilty of being too wordy and too bossy. It was nothing but talk. The Protestant Reformation attempted to return to earlier, purer forms, but as I noted in my research, its origins were as much economic as theological. The merchant class was tired of their employees getting all those Catholic feast days off work. They wanted something plain and simple, not from piety but from profit motive. They decried as unbiblical and irreligious and wasteful all the finery of the Catholic religion. But follow the money and you find the real motivation. Modern Christianity is fractured into thousands of denominations, each claiming to possess the truth. Catholics say salvation requires the Church and its sacraments. Calvinists say it's predestined. Arminians say it's chosen. Pentecostals emphasize the Spirit. Fundamentalists emphasize the Bible. Eastern Orthodox emphasize theoses. But what unites them? The basic theological architecture. God as Trinity, one divine, essence in three persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Creation and fall. God creates good world. Humans rebel. Sin enters. Incarnation of God. Becomes human in Jesus Christ. Atonement. Christ's death pays for human sin. Resurrection. Christ defeats death. Salvation, forgiveness, and eternal life offered through Christ, church community of believers, body of Christ, eschatology of Christ will return, final judgment, new heaven and earth. The ethical framework centers on the dual command: love God with your whole heart, love your neighbor as yourself. This includes loving enemies, forgiving those who wrong you, turning the other cheek, giving to those who ask, doing unto others as you'd have done to you. At its mystical core, Christianity teaches that the separate self must die for the true self to emerge. I, yet not I, but Christ in me, Paul wrote. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. Jesus taught. This is sophisticated non-dual teaching, indistinguishable in its essential insight from Vedanta or Zen, but this mystical heart is often buried under layers of institutional control, dogmatic rigidity, guilt manipulation, and political ambition. The religion that began with Jesus overturning the money changers' tables in the temple became itself a money-changing temple operation. The cosmic dance, so how opposites create each other. Now here's where we need to step back and see the pattern. Christianity and Satanism exist in what the Taoists call mutual arising. Each creates the other. Each defines itself by what it opposes. Neither could exist without the other. Christianity needs Satan to explain evil without blaming God. Satanism needs Christianity to rebel against. The Christian says, submit to God's will. The Satanist says, be your own God. The Christian says, deny yourself. The Satanist says, indulge yourself. The Christian says, love your enemies. The Satanist says, destroy those who oppose you. It looks like absolute opposition, but as the Tao teaching observes, when people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. The moment you establish one pole, you create its opposite. You cannot have up without down, light without darkness, good without evil. This is the profound insight that both traditions miss of the very act of dividing reality into absolute good and evil creates the problem both claim to solve. Christianity creates the concept of sin, then offers salvation from it. Satanism embraces what Christianity condemns, but remains imprisoned in the same dualistic frame. From a Zen perspective, both are caught in conceptual traps. Both are mistaking the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. Both are taking seriously what the gods, if there are any, made for fun. Let me put it more precisely. Christianity is right that self-centered egotism causes suffering. Its error is in creating an external god to submit to, as if the problem of ego could be solved by bowing to a bigger ego in the sky. Laveyan Satanism is right that much religious morality is hypocritical guilt-mongering. Its error is in deifying the very ego that's the source of the problem. The mystics in both traditions, though there are precious few satanic mystics, understand something deeper. Meister Eckhart prayed, I pray God to rid me of God. That is, to move beyond the conceptual idol of God to the reality that transcends all concepts. John of the Cross wrote of the dark night of the soul, where all concepts of God, all spiritual consolations, fall away, leaving only naked being. This is what the Upanishads point to with neti neti, not this, not that. What you are is not any object of consciousness, not any concept, not even the concept self or God or Satan. You are the awareness within which all these concepts appear. Here's the delicious irony: the Christian practice of kenosis, self-emptying. Ego death leads to the same realization that Buddhist no-self teaching points to, but Christianity wraps it in theistic language while Satanism wraps egoic assertion in religious language. Both miss the fundamental insight that there is no separate self to either empty or deify. Ritual as psychodrama. The technology of transformation. Let's talk about what actually happens in religious practice, because this is where things get interesting. Both Christianity and Satanism use ritual, but they understand it differently. Catholic and Orthodox Christianity have elaborate liturgies: the Mass, the divine liturgy that enact cosmic drama. Through transubstantiation, Catholic or transformation Orthodox, bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ. The faithful consume the deity. It's profound mystical symbolism. You are what you eat. Eat God. Become God. The Catholic Mass follows a structure liturgy of the word readings, homily and liturgy of the Eucharist, consecration, communion. The Orthodox divine liturgy is even more elaborate, with icons, incense, chanting, procession, all the senses engaged, all pointing toward the transcendent may domain, and Protestant worship varies enormously, from high Anglican liturgy basically Catholic without the Pope to Pentecostal spontaneity speaking in tongues, healing, prophecy to Baptist simplicity, preaching, singing, altar call, but all aimed to facilitate encounter with the divine. LaVeyan satanic ritual looks remarkably similar in structure, which shouldn't surprise us since LaVey borrowed heavily from Catholic tradition. A naked woman serves as the altar Satanism's deliberate inversion of Catholic reverence for the Virgin. Black candles, the sigil of Baphomet, a chalice, a bell rung 9 times, written requests to Satan, invocations in Enochian borrowed from Renaissance occultist John Dee. But, and this is crucial, LaVey was explicit that these rituals are psychodrama, not supernatural invocation. They work by focusing emotional energy, providing cathartic release, suspending normal skepticism to access non-rational aspects of consciousness. It's group therapy with medieval aesthetics. The Satanic Temple takes this even further in the non-supernatural direction. The rituals are optional, creative, explicitly artistic rather than magical. Thun baptism renounces childhood religious indoctrination. The destruction ritual involves destroying an object symbolizing pain. The abortion ritual affirms bodily autonomy. These are meaning-making ceremonies, not power-invoking rites. Now, what both traditions fail to fully appreciate is what any anthropologist or depth psychologist knows: all ritual works psychologically and socially, whether you believe in supernatural forces or not. The Catholic Mass doesn't require literal transubstantiation to be transformative. The ritual itself, the gathering, the words, the actions, the symbols reorganizes consciousness and reinforces community identity. Similarly, LaVeyan ritual doesn't require disbelief in magic to provide catharsis. The theatrical elements, the transgressive symbolism, the permission to express forbidden emotions, these work regardless of your metaphysical commitments. This is what I meant when I wrote about myth and ritual in Christianity. These are concrete expressions of the inner meaning of the universe and of human life. They work not as literal truth but as lived truth that's enacted, embodied, experienced rather than merely believed. The Zen-tea ceremony doesn't require belief that spirits inhabit the tea utensils. It works by focusing attention, creating aesthetic harmony, and manifesting presence in simple actions. Christian or satanic ritual can function the same way as techniques for transformation of consciousness rather than supernatural engineering. The problem of evil: 2 solutions. Both traditions obsess over evil, but they offer radically different solutions to the problem. Christianity's theodicy goes something like this: a God is omnipotent, omniscient, and perfectly good. Evil exists. How can this be? Various answers have been offered. Free will defense: a God gave humans free will. Evil results from wrong choices. Free will is worth. Soul-making theodicy: suffering develops character, virtue, spiritual maturity. Privation theory: Augustine: evil isn't a substance, but a privation, the absence of good. Greater good defense: a God permits evil to bring about greater goods. Inscrutability: God's ways are beyond human understanding. Satanism, particularly LaVeyan, dismisses the entire question. There is no omnipotent good God, so there's no problem of evil. The universe is indifferent. Humans are animals. Suffering happens. Strength survives. Weakness perishes. Accept it. There's a kind of Nietzschean amor fati here, love of fate, acceptance of what is. DSD adds a political dimension. Evil is often the label those in power apply to those who resist their authority. Fighting for justice may be labeled evil by unjust institutions. The devil becomes the symbol of resistance to tyranny, not of cosmic malevolence. But here's what neither tradition fully grasps: the problem isn't evil. The problem is the way we frame the problem. We divide reality into good and evil, then become trapped in that division. We create categories, then forget their categories and treat them as ultimate realities. In Mahayana Buddhism, there's a concept called Shunyata, emptiness, not nihilistic nothingness, but the empty, open quality of all phenomena. Things have no fixed, independent essence. They're interdependent, fluid, contextual. What appears as evil from one perspective may be the seed of good from another. What we call good may contain the seeds of evil. This doesn't mean moral relativism, that anything goes. It means understanding that our moral categories, while useful, are maps not territories, fingers pointing not moons themselves. Compassion, arises naturally when we see clearly. We don't need elaborate theological justifications for kindness or demonologies to explain cruelty. We just need to wake up to what's actually happening. Christianity at its mystical best understands this. When Julian of Norwich wrote, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well," she wasn't denying evil, she was seeing for a perspective where even suffering has meaning within the larger pattern. When Meister Eckhart said God is the denial of denial, he was pointing beyond all conceptual categories. Satanism at its philosophical best also touches this. When LaVey says Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, as he has kept it in business all these years, he's recognizing the symbiotic relationship, where TSD emphasizes that the spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. They're prioritizing lived wisdom over conceptual rigidity, but mostly, both traditions remain trapped in the very dualism they claim to transcend. Authority and freedom are the irony of submission and rebellion. Christianity says submit to God's will. Freedom comes through obedience. As Jesus said, "Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." Die to self. Live to God. This is actually psychologically profound when you see what it's pointing to. The ego, the limited, separate sense of I is the source of suffering. Its ceaseless demands for pleasure, security, recognition, control create a prison. Surrendering this false self opens space for something larger, more real. Christians call it the Holy Spirit, grace, union with Christ. Zen calls it your original face before your parents were born. Same moon, different fingers. But institutional Christianity too often translates this into authoritarian control. Submit to the church. Don't question doctrine. Accept hierarchical power. The Pope is infallible. The Bible is inerrant. Female subordination is divine design. Homosexuality is sin. Conform or be condemned. This is where the religion of love your enemies became the religion of the Inquisition, where the gospel of liberation became a tool of oppression, where the God of infinite love somehow requires eternal torture for those who don't believe correctly. It's a rather spectacular corruption of the original message. LaVeyan Satanism says a don't submit command. You are your own God. Freedom comes through assertion of will, gratification of desires, refusal to bow to any external authority. As LaVey wrote, "Say unto thine own heart, I am mine own Redeemer." This feels liberating, especially if you've been wounded by authoritarian religion. No more guilt, no more shame, no more pretending to be anything other than what you are, a clever animal pursuing its own interests. But here's a trap: the self you're elevating is itself a construct. The ego you're deifying is a story you tell yourself. And making that story the highest authority doesn't free you, it imprisons you more completely in the illusion that there's a separate you that needs defending, gratifying, exalting. Moreover, LaVey's ethics of kindness to those who deserve it and vengeance instead of turning the other cheek creates its own prison. Now you must constantly evaluate who deserves kindness and who deserves destruction. You must maintain vigilance against threats. You must never show weakness. It's exhausting. TSD tries to thread the needle individual autonomy combined with compassion and justice. Your body is inviolable, that's your freedom, but you should act with empathy toward others. That's your responsibility. It's actually quite similar to the Buddhist middle way in neither self-mortification nor self-indulgence. The deeper truth, which the mystics of all traditions glimpse, is that the whole freedom versus submission framework is misconceived. There is no separate self to be either free or submissive. There is no God out there to either obey or rebel against. There's just this reality as it is, the eternal now. What the Zen masters call suchness, or what I like to call this, is it. When Jesus said I and the Father are one, he wasn't claiming to be the one guy in history who's identical with God. He was pointing to the fundamental non-duality of reality. When the Upanishads declare tat te vamasi thou art, that they are making the same point. What you truly are is not different from the ground of being itself, but this realization doesn't come through submission or rebellion. It comes through seeing clearly, and that seeing includes seeing through the illusion that there's someone separate who could either submit or rebel in the first place. Sin and indulgence, the dance of repression and expression. Christianity, particularly in its Augustinian forms, as a sin problem. Original sin corrupts human nature from birth. Concupiscence, the inclination toward sin, remains even after baptism. Every impulse must be suspected. The flesh wars against the spirit. Lust, pride, greed, gluttony, anger, these must be controlled, confessed, repented. The 7 deadly sins become a catalogue of natural human experiences to feel guilty about. Feel pride in accomplishment. Sin. Enjoy food and sex. Sin. Get angry at injustice. Sin. Desire what others have. Sin. It's a comprehensive system for creating neurosis. Now, there's something psychologically accurate beneath this. The unchecked ego does cause suffering. Addiction destroys lives. Rage harms relationships. Greed creates injustice. But Christianity's solution suppression through guilt and fear of divine punishment often makes things worse. The repressed doesn't disappear. It returns in distorted forms. The priest who preaches against lust while molesting children. The televangelist railing against greed while living in a mansion. The congregation judging others' sins while hiding their own. As I've often observed, man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun. Christianity takes human impulses perfectly natural, evolved responses and labels them cosmic offences requiring divine intervention to fix. It creates the wound it claims to heal. LaVey's response is to embrace everything Christianity condemns. The 9 satanic statements explicitly celebrate indulgence, pride, lust, all the deadly sins. Satan represents all of the so-called sins, as they all lead to physical, mental, or emotional gratification. There's a kind of honesty here. A refusal to be hypocritical about natural desires. If you're going to pursue pleasure, power, and self-interest any way which most people do, religious or not, why not acknowledge it rather than hide behind pious rhetoric? But LaVey's indulgence, not compulsion, is more sophisticated than mere hedonism. He wasn't advocating addiction or loss of control, strategic restraint, patience, when tactically useful, discipline in service of long-term success. These are all compatible with his system. It's more like Epicureanism, intelligent pursuit of pleasure, which includes avoiding painful consequences. Still, there's something missing in both Christian repression and satanic indulgence. The Taoist and Buddhist middle way suggests that both extremes miss the point. The problem isn't desire itself but clinging and aversion, grasping at pleasant experiences and pushing away unpleasant ones. This creates suffering. The solution isn't repression, which just strengthens the impulse, through resistance, or indulgence, which strengthens the impulse, through reinforcement. It's awareness. When you see a desire clearly, without judgment but also without identification, it has less power. You can choose whether to act on it based on wisdom, rather than compulsion or prohibition. Christianity at its contemplative best understands this. The Desert Fathers spoke of apathy, not suppression of emotions, but non-attachment to them. There, you notice them, but you don't identify with them or act from them compulsively. Thomas Merton, the Catholic monk steeped in Zen, understood that Christian purity was not about never having impure thoughts, but about not being ruled by them. LaVey never quite got here. He remained at the level of smart self-interest, better than neurotic guilt, certainly, but short of genuine wisdom. Community and individualism. Who are you, really? Christianity emphasizes the church as the body of Christ. No one is an island, as John Donne wrote. Salvation happens in community. The sacraments, the communal acts. You're baptized into the church. You share the Eucharist with the congregation. You're accountable to the fellowship. Even Protestant individualism, personal relationship with Jesus happens within the context of church community. This reflects something true. We are social animals, formed by our relationships, dependent on others for survival, meaning, and flourishing. The atomized individual is a fiction. You don't exist apart from the web of relationships that constitute your life. Christianity's error is often in making the institution the mediator of divine grace. No salvation outside the church, proclaimed the Catholic doctrine extra ecclesiam nulla salus. Want to connect with God, go through our priests, accept our dogmas, submit to our hierarchy. The community becomes a control mechanism. LaVeyan Satanism goes to the opposite. Extreme radical individualism. You are your own God. Each person is sovereign. The elite Satanist stands apart from the herd. Community is for the weak who need the comfort of conformity. The strong stand alone. This is philosophically naive. The individual you're celebrating is itself a social construction. Your language, your concepts, your values, your sense of identity, all these come from your social context. The rugged individualist owes everything to the society he scorns. Even Anton LaVey, celebrating his uniqueness, was synthesizing Nietzsche, Rand, Crowley, Redbeard hardly creating ex nihilo. Moreover, the valorization of individual power over collective good creates precisely the kind of society no one would want to live in. Ayn Rand's novels are adolescent power fantasies. A world where everyone practiced LaVey's ethics would be a Hobbesian nightmare, nasty, brutish, and short. TSD tries for balanced individual autonomy. Your body is yours. Your beliefs are yours, combined with justice, compassion, and community engagement. Their congregations actually function as communities, with charitable works, mutual support, shared values. They've recognized what LaVey Mr. Humans flourish in relationship, not isolation. But here's the deeper question neither tradition fully confronts: and who is this individual we're either submitting or exalting? Where's the boundary between me and not me? You breathe air that's been through others' lungs. You eat food grown by others' labour. You think thoughts composed of language you didn't invent. Your body replaces all its cells every 7 years. Your sense of I is a narrative constructed moment by your brain. Where's the stable, separate, autonomous individual? As I wrote in the book, we do not come into this world, we come out of it, as leaves from a tree, as the ocean waves, the universe peoples. You are not a separate fragment accidentally tossed into an alien universe. You are the universe experiencing itself at this particular location. Christian mystics like Eckhart recognized this as the eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. There's no ultimate separation between self and God, between individual and cosmos. The apparent separation is the veil that must be lifted. LaVey never got anywhere near this insight. He was too busy building up the ego to recognize its fundamental transparency. Magic, miracle, and meaning. Let's talk about what both traditions claim actually works. Christianity says prayer works. Ask and you shall receive. The prayer of faith heals the sick. Intercession changes outcomes. The sacraments channel divine grace. Miracles happen, water becomes wine. The blind see. The dead rise. The Holy Spirit grants spiritual gifts of prophecy, healing, tongues, discernment. Catholicism and Orthodoxy have elaborate systems: petitionary prayer to God, intercessory prayer to saints, sacramental grace through properly performed rituals, relics with miraculous power, exorcism expelling demons, blessings conferring protection. Protestantism generally simplifies a direct prayer to God through Jesus. Faith that moves mountains, spiritual gifts especially among charismatics and Pentecostals, but less emphasis on intermediaries and ritual mechanisms. Does it work? Well, the faithful report answered prayers, miraculous healings, protection from harm, comfort in suffering. Skeptics note confirmation bias, placebo effects, coincidence misattributed to divine intervention, and the conspicuous absence of miracles when properly controlled. Amputated limbs never grew back, no matter how much faith. LaVeyan Satanism says magic works, but explicitly not through supernatural intervention. Greater magic is psychological. The ritual focuses will and releases emotion. Lesser magic is manipulation through psychology, seduction, intimidation, fascination. The change in situations or events in accordance with one's will happens through natural but supernormal means. The power of focused intention, enhanced by ritual theatre. Does it work? Practitioners report curses manifesting, sex rituals attracting partners, compassion rituals bringing success. Skeptics note that any outcome can be interpreted as confirmation the curse worked. If the target suffers, they weren't worthy of my magic. If they don't, that confidence and focused action do tend to improve outcomes through normal psychology, not magic, and that theatrical ritual can genuinely affect consciousness but through neuroscience, not supernatural forces. Theistic Satanists actually believe in supernatural forces and entities. They invoke demons, petition Satan, perform blood rituals, claim tangible results. Some report powerful experiences, entities manifesting, sudden knowledge, life changes. Others describe it as working with dark energy or left-hand path spiritual forces. Now, what's actually happening in all these cases? From one perspective, it's all delusion, just psychology and coincidence dressed up in supernatural clothing. From another perspective, something real is happening, but not what the practitioners think. Any ritual reorganizes consciousness. It engages the non-rational parts of the brain through symbol, rhythm, repetition, altered states. It creates meaning by enacting significance. It focuses intention. It provides emotional release. It reinforces identity and community. All of this affects behavior, which affects outcomes. Prayer works not because an external deity intervenes, but because the act of praying clarifies values, reduces anxiety, increases hope, and often motivates action. Meditation works not because you're contacting higher planes, but because you're training attention and regulating nervous system arousal. Satanic ritual works not because Satan grants power, but because claiming power affects how you engage with the world. The question, but does it really work, misses the point. Meanings are real. Stories are powerful. Rituals transform. The mechanism isn't supernatural, but the effects are genuine. This is what I tried to communicate in myth and ritual in Christianity. These are concrete expressions that human beings regard as demonstrations of the inner meaning of the universe and of human life. They work not as literal fact, but as lived truth. The tragedy is that both Christianity and Satanism insist on their literal metaphysics when the experiential truth is available regardless. Christians spend energy defending virgin births and resurrections as historical facts when the transformative power is in the meaning, not the historicity. Satanists argue about whether magic is real when the psychological and social effects are observable either way. As the Zen masters say, don't confuse the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. The wisdom, both miss beyond good and evil, but not beyond good and bad. Now we come to what both traditions fail to see, which is where Eastern philosophy can help. Christianity is trapped in dualism: God versus Satan, good versus evil, saved versus damned, heaven versus hell, spirit versus flesh. Everything is divided, categorized, judged. You're on one side or the other. The sheep go to eternal life, the goats to eternal punishment. LaVeyan Satanism inverts the values but keeps the dualism: the strong versus the weak, the elite versus the herd, indulgence versus abstinence, vital existence versus spiritual pipe dreams. It's still fundamentally oppositional. TSD is more sophisticated but still defines itself in opposition to Christian privilege, political repression, religious authority. Its very identity is reactive. But the great wisdom traditions of Asia, Taoism, Buddhism, began to point beyond dualism altogether. The Tao teaching begins at the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. As soon as you divide reality into categories, you've missed it. The yin-yang symbol perfectly captures this: are complementary opposites that contain each other, transform into each other, create each other. You cannot have darkness without light. The seed of each is in the other. They're not at war, they're dancing. In Buddhism, the teaching of pratitya samutpada dependent origination shows that nothing exists independently. Everything arises in relationship, interdependent with everything else. Good creates evil, evil creates good, pleasure creates pain, pain creates pleasure, self creates other, other creates self. This isn't moral relativism. The Buddha was quite clear: some actions lead to suffering dukkha, others lead to its cessation. But the classification isn't absolute or eternal. It's contextual, pragmatic, oriented toward the reduction of suffering. When Nietzsche proclaimed beyond good and evil, he was pointing to something similar: the recognition that our moral categories are human constructions, not cosmic absolutes. But Nietzsche and LaVey following him made the error of thinking beyond good and evil meant abandoning compassion, embracing power, and scorning weakness. It doesn't. Being beyond good and evil means seeing that the categories are maps, not territories, useful fictions, not ultimate realities. It doesn't mean cruelty is okay. It means understanding that what appears as evil from one perspective may be the seed of good from another, and vice versa. Christianity creates the concept of sin, then offers salvation. But what if there's nothing to be saved from? What if your fundamental nature, what the Buddha called your Buddha nature, what Christians might call the image of God within, is already whole, already complete, already free? Then the entire structure collapses. LaVey defies the ego. But what if the ego is an illusion? What if the self you're worshipping is a convenient fiction, useful for navigating the world, but not an entity, not a thing, not something that can be exalted or needs to be defended? Then that structure collapses too. This is the realization both traditions defend against. There is no separate self to be saved or exalted. There is no cosmic battle between good and evil. There is just this reality as it is, the vast field of being and becoming, arising and passing away, flowering and fading, compassion arising what remains after, the opposites collapse. So what happens when you see through dualism? Do you become an immoral monster, as Christianity fears? Do you become a spineless weakling, as Satanism fears? Neither. What arises naturally is what the Buddhists call karuna, compassion, not from duty or command, not from seeking reward or avoiding punishment, but spontaneously, as water flows downhill. Why? Because when you see clearly that the boundaries between self and other are conventions, not ultimates, harming others is revealed as harming yourself, not in some mystical magical sense where your curse bounces back, but in a simple recognition that we're all in this together, all expressions of the same process, all waves in the same ocean. This is what Jesus actually taught. Beneath all the theological overlay, love your enemies, forgive 70 times 7, the last shall be first. Whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me. He was pointing to the fundamental non-separation between self and other. This is what ESD stumbles toward with its emphasis on compassion and justice, though they don't fully understand why. They've rejected Levian cruelty, not because an external authority commanded it, but because compassion is more satisfying, more real, more aligned with how things actually are. The Christian error is making compassion a duty enforced by divine command. Be loving or go to hell. This turns virtue into coercion and often produces the opposite of resentment, hypocrisy, cruelty justified by righteousness. The Levian error is making compassion a weakness. Only help those who help you. Curse those who curse you. Might makes right. This is spiritually and practically bankrupt a philosophy that makes sociopaths its ideal. True compassion is neither duty nor weakness. It's wisdom embodied. It's what happens when you see clearly and act from that clarity. Does this mean everyone should be Buddhist? No, I'm not selling anything. I'm simply pointing out that both Christianity and Satanism are caught in the same trap. They take their conceptual maps for the territory, their stories for ultimate reality, their fingers pointing at the moon for the moon itself, playing the game with style. Let me tell you something that will probably irritate both Christians and Satanists. Of the whole thing is a game, not in the sense that it doesn't matter or that people aren't genuinely transformed by these traditions, but in the sense that ultimate reality, the Tao, the ground of being, suchness, what I call the witch, than which there is no witcher can't be captured in any theological system. Christianity is one way of playing, Satanism is another. Both have their moves, their strategies, their wins and losses. Both can be played beautifully or badly. Both produce saints and monsters. A Christian playing the game beautifully looks like Francis of Assisi, radical simplicity, love for all creation, joy in poverty, peacemaking, or like Martin Luther King Jr. justice grounded in love, resistance without hatred, redemptive suffering. A Christian playing the game badly looks like the Inquisition, torture in service of truth, murder in defense of orthodoxy, power cloaked in piety. A Satanist playing the game beautifully looks like TSD at its best, using the system's own principles against its hypocrisy, standing for individual liberty and church-state separation, finding dignity in embracing the outcast role. A Satanist playing the game badly looks like the Order of Nine Angles, nihilistic violence, actual harm to innocents, cruelty justified by philosophy. The question isn't which game is absolutely true, neither is. The question is how are you playing the game? With wisdom or foolishness? With compassion or cruelty? With awareness or blind belief? As I've always maintained, truly religious people always make jokes about their religion. Their faith is so strong that they can afford it. Can you laugh at your own beliefs? And you see the cosmic humor in taking seriously what was made for play. Both traditions tend toward earnestness, self-importance, humorlessness. Christians insist their salvation story is the one true history of the cosmos. Satanists insist their rebellion is meaningful resistance rather than predictable adolescent reaction. But the universe, if it has any attitude at all, is probably just amused by the whole show. The practical upshot, what actually helps. After all this philosophical meandering, let's get practical. If you're a human trying to navigate existence, what actually helps? Christianity offers community and belonging, moral framework reducing decision fatigue, practices like prayer and meditation, meaning in suffering, hope beyond death, rich artistic and liturgical tradition, social support networks, contemplative wisdom if you dig deep enough, Christianity's problems, often authoritarian and controlling, creates unnecessary guilt and shame, excludes and judges those who differ, can infantilize adherents. Supernatural claims require belief despite evidence. History of tremendous violence and oppression tends toward hypocrisy. LaVeyan Satanism offers permission to be honest about desires, freedom from religious guilt, ritual as psychodrama and catharsis, philosophical sophistication beyond simple inversion, recognition of human animal nature, emphasis on personal responsibility, aesthetic pleasure in transgression. LaVeyan Satanism's problems, social Darwinism is morally bankrupt, deifying the ego is philosophically confused, vengeance-based ethics create endless conflict, elitism is ungrounded and destructive, lacks genuine community, potentially cultivates narcissism and cruelty, ultimately unsatisfying for mature individuals. The Satanic Temple offers effective political activism, compassion combined with individual autonomy, science-based worldview, community, without authoritarianism, clear ethical framework, church-state separation, advocacy, creative ritual without supernaturalism, TSD's problems, still defined reactively, against Christianity, limited depth compared to established traditions, unclear how meaningful membership remains long-term, some internal governance controversies, trolling can overshadow substantive philosophy. What I'd suggest, and I'm not claiming authority here, just offering observation, is taking what works from any tradition while remaining free. Use Christian contemplative practices if they help. Enjoy satanic ritual theatre if it provides catharsis. Engage TSD activism if you care about church-state separation, but don't confuse any map with the territory. The practices that actually help are remarkably consistent across traditions in contemplation and meditation, community and meaningful relationships, service to others, creative expression, ethical behavior aligned with values, acceptance of impermanence, erect experience over belief, humor and perspective. You don't need the mythology to access these, but if the mythology helps you practice them, use it. Just don't mistake the story for reality. Beyond the devil's bargain, both Christianity and Satanism offer a kind of bargain. Christianity says submit to God. Follow Jesus, accept salvation, and you'll have eternal life, meaning, purpose, community, and escape from hell. Satanism says assert yourself, follow your will, become your own God, and you'll have power, pleasure, authenticity, and escape from guilt. But here's the thing about bargains: they assume you have something to trade. They assume a separate self that can choose, negotiate, gain, or lose, and this is the fundamental illusion both traditions reinforce. There is no separate self that needs salvation from sin or elevation to godhood. The wave doesn't need to be saved from being a wave or exalted into being the ocean. It already is the ocean, expressing itself as wave. The apparently separate self is already the totality expressing itself as apparently separate self. When you see this, not believe it, but actually see it directly, the entire structure of both religion and anti-religion collapses, not into nihilism or amorality, but into simple, direct engagement with what is. You breathe in and out, you think this and feel that, you interact with other apparent selves in the great dance, you live and die. This is it. Not a problem to be solved or a deficit to be corrected, but the way things are complete, sufficient, whole exactly as it is. The Christian might call this heretical, the Satanist might call it weak, and both would be missing the point, which is that there's no point to miss. The finger pointing at the moon is not the moon, but the moon is right there, visible to anyone who stops staring at fingers. The final paradox, sacred rebellion and rebellious sanctity. Let me end with this observation: Christianity and Satanism need each other not just historically but structurally. Christianity needs Satan to explain evil. Satanism needs Christianity to rebel against. Remove one and the other loses meaning. But more than that, each contains the seed of the other. Christianity's core teaching: die to self. Lose your life to find it is profoundly anti-egoic, anti-authoritarian, revolutionary. Jesus was executed as a criminal. His followers were outlaws. His teaching inverted Roman values. Original Christianity was satanic, in the best sense adversarial to power, protective of the marginalized, willing to transgress boundaries in service of truth. Similarly, Satanism's core teaching being authentically yourself, resist false authority, think for yourself is profoundly spiritual, even mystical, if rightly understood, the Gnostic serpent bringing knowledge, the Luciferian light-bearer illuminating darkness, the adversary questioning orthodoxy. These are spiritual archetypes, functions of awakening consciousness. The tragedy is that both traditions crystallized into their most limited forms. Christianity became the Roman Empire wearing a cross. Satanism became adolescent rebellion codified into philosophy. But beneath the crystallization, the living water still flows. Meister Eckhart and Julian of Norwich still point to the mystical core of Christianity. The Satanic Temple's compassionate activism still points toward meaning beyond mere reaction. What we need isn't more Christianity or more Satanism. What we need is to see through both to what they're inadequately pointing toward, the liberation that comes not from submission or rebellion but from seeing clearly, the ethics that arises not from commandment or transgression but from wisdom, the community that forms not through shared belief or shared opposition but through shared being. This isn't a third way between Christianity and Satanism. It's what both are clumsily reaching for beneath all their theological furniture. It's what Jesus meant beneath all the Christology. It's what LaVey intuited beneath all his social Darwinism. It's what DSD practices beneath all their political theatre. It's simply being awake, being present, being real, which turns out to be the hardest and easiest thing in the world. And if you can see the humour in all this Christianity and Satanism locked in their cosmic wrestling match, each depending on the other for definition, neither able to escape the other's gravity, then you're beginning to get somewhere. As I used to say, man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun. The whole magnificent drama of good versus evil, submission versus rebellion, salvation versus damnation, heaven versus hell, it's all a grand game. Play it with style, laugh at its absurdities, but don't mistake it for ultimate truth, because ultimate truth, if such a thing exists, is simpler and more immediate than any theology or anti-theology. It's here, it's now, it's this breath, this moment, this exact experience of being alive. This is it, and it was never not it, no matter which side of the cross you're on.